and welcome to our 208th Right and Left discussion. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss some of the questions that we think need to be answered before we attempt to develop expensive and disruptive solutions to the climate change problem. Opening our discussion today is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Then Tom Finley, retired vice president of human resources development at Rubbermaid Incorporated and former public school teacher and principal. Then Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services, and Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired math teacher at Wadsworth High School. Ron, according to many scientists, planet Earth will become unlivable in the near future unless we find a way to reduce or eliminate the steady progress of climate change. As a scientist, you're in the business of asking questions. What would be on your list of essential questions regarding stopping climate change?
Thank you, John. Excuse me. It's allergy season. Many questions. Rather than go into a long list, I'm going to give you a couple of examples with some ideas of what I think the kind of approach that we need to take. It needs to be data-driven. Before that, though, I'm going to give just a brief summary of what we're talking about here. I know all of you know when we're talking climate change, we're talking the general warming of the planet, and why that might be happening. It's called the greenhouse effect or greenhouse gases because it's an analogy to what happens inside a greenhouse, where the sun's rays warm the surfaces inside and they generate infrared radiation. And this heats up the air. That air is trapped by the glass of the greenhouse and the whole thing heats up. Similarly, in our atmosphere, there are a couple of chemicals which, when the infrared radiation comes bouncing back from the Earth, all the Earth radiation warms it up, and that heat is an infrared radiation, long wavelengths, that causes a vibration of certain molecules in the environment, among them carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor. If we didn't have CO2 in the atmosphere, we'd have a very cold planet. But for millennia, that's been an equilibrium. We know this because we can look at data from things like ice cores and glaciers. We can analyze what's happened over the years. And as green plants use carbon dioxide and generate oxygen, once in a while they'll catch fire, be a lightning strike. The advent of people would burn that wood. But that's kind of a closed system. That's sort of a carbon neutral because on geologic terms, burning a wooden tree puts this carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but it's not been formed that long ago. But sometime later, we discovered we could take that black rock out of the earth and burn that, and we found oil, we found natural gas. And the problem was that those have been there sequestered away for a long, long time. So the equilibrium of what's in the ground and what's in the atmosphere had begun to change. And we all seen the curves, I think, of how the temperature of the planet has gone up. The concentration of carbon dioxide and methane in the atmospheres had gone up in parallel with that. And the number of us on the Earth has increased a lot. I looked up a little data because I was interested in this. In 1800, it was estimated there were 1 billion people on the planet. The latest data I found was 2019, 8 billion. Now, the rate of change of population growth has gone down. It's down to about 1%. That's still 80,000 people. That's still 80 million people a year, increasing in our planet. So we're all using these resources. We're all burning these stuff. It's all going into the atmosphere. It's trying to reach a new equilibrium. So things that have been tried, and what we need to look at. We need to try to do a cost-benefit analysis, I think, of everything we'll look at. Here's a case in point. Discovered a couple of years ago, if you put 10 to 15% of ethyl alcohol in your gasoline, you could decrease the amount of emissions. Well, okay, there's a couple of things here, and I don't know that due diligence has been given to analyzing all of the causes and effects and all the unintended consequences. First of all, it's probably not cost efficient because I understand the government sometimes has to, we, the taxpayers, have to subsidize the farmers who are growing the corn from which to make the ethanol. Secondly, it's pretty well known. I have direct evidence of that from a friend who's was an engineer. He's passed away now, unfortunately, but he owned 4 Cadillacs, two classic cars and 2 more contemporary ones, and he kept very, very careful analyses of the miles per gallon. As soon as ethanol was added, the miles per gallon went down. So that means we have to burn more to get the same amount of mileage out of our fuel. Is this okay? Does this give us a net drop in the amount of CO2? I don't know that due diligence has been done. Solar power. Someone has suggested that maybe this takes up arable land. Well, it certainly does here in the Northeast. Yeah, you look at how they're arranged, the 2 installations in Wadsworth, and there's one down at Ritzman, at least one down at Ritzman, down along 57, it's passed by the sewage treatment there. And they're packed in closely together. So, of course, in Medina County, most of the arable land has houses on it, so maybe that doesn't really apply so much. And it's been estimated that we have enough desert areas in the world that, particularly in the United States, if we put them out there, we have enough power, would make enough power to supply the entire country. However, you've got to say this uses resources. It may use it. You have to make the solar cells. You have to put them out there. You have to be careful you don't completely destroy the environment in the desert by covering up all the surface area. And you've got to get the power here. You've got to do research on batteries. You have to build batteries. Do these take precious resources? How much do they cost to build them? How much energy does it take to make them? How much energy does it take to get the power from the deserts of Nevada to New York City, for example? So this is the kind of thing that we have to look at. We have to look at cost and benefit. And things like nuclear power, we have to look at risk analysis as well. And the cost of, again, that's taxpayer subsidized, and the cost of uranium. Does this pay? You're not getting any carbon dioxide from a nuclear plant, but how much does that cost? Is this worth doing? So I think all these questions have to be answered. I have to be fair about it. I do believe that carbon dioxide generated by people's use of fossil fuels in this environment is the direct cause of promoting the global warming. I think that's true. There are probably alternative theories, and again, we need to look at those. I think some are saying scientists aren't pure. No, they're not. They have to look for grant money. And the last organization I was looked in, I remember I've written some government reports on there that it didn't really completely address the questions that the sponsors were asking. I had a thesis advisor who says, well, if you can't dazzle them with science, if you can't baffle them with science, you got to dazzle them with bull. So he was a little more explicit than that. But you do have to look. You do have to look at that. You do have to keep that in mind. And there are some serious questions to be answered. I think one thing you have to think about, and that is it cheaper to do it now or to wait till it gets much worse and then try to do it? How expensive is it to combat this by the various means that we can think of versus building a wall around Miami Beach, keep the ocean out?
Well,
so
Ron, you've really covered the waterfront there. I very appreciate that. Tom, what are your thoughts? Tom?
Yes.
Oh.
I haven't fallen asleep. That was very interesting. Thank you. I think like any issue facing us, the first thing we have to look at is leadership. Where are we going to put this in our vast governmental system where responsibility can take place and where we can then allocate the resources to make it happen? And I guess I would use the example, if we had not done that with the crisis that faced us with World War II, we would have lost. We have the same crisis here. The enemy is just different, and more frightening. But the need for leadership who can allocate resources and manage it and solve the problems on a priority basis is still the priority. How do we make that happen with a government? I don't want to call it weak, but it is confused because it's all about politics rather than survival, and the list goes on. So that's my opening comment and my opening concern, that first things first. So we can have all the scientific knowledge at our hands, but if we don't have leadership, it won't happen.
Bryan, do you have some questions in your mind about this issue?
Well, Ron really laid it out in a very clear way, and I would agree that it needs to be studied and a very systematic approach to solving the issue. We're seeing now in Europe, in the European Union, when they lurch towards this whole idea of, the Green New Deal, they had their own little thing going over there, and they're in the world of hurt. They shut down some of their nuclear power plants, Germany specifically. They were going to go green, the next day. Gas prices, with all the taxes that they throw on them to fund transition costs in their economy. They never really put in the calculus of this a war, which Europe hadn't seen in many, many years, in decades. And now they're in a conflict with Russia, which is providing a large percentage of their energy, from oil to LNG, and they're in a rock and a hard place. Some of the prices for electricity that they're going to see this winter, it's gone through the roof. 600-700% increase in electricity. I think Britain, their new prime minister, has just put a cap on what an energy company can charge, and we know caps don't work. The market is the market, and unfortunately, those folks have found themselves in a very sticky position that I don't think they really planned on. So I'm for a slow and steady move to a transition that is sustainable, that we can all live with, that mitigates some of the issues that Ron has talked about. The city has a portfolio of energy providers. They have some wind, they have some nuclear, they have those solar fields. I'm not sure what percentage of our overall usage that those solar fields possess. I'm told it's somewhere in the 10 megawatts when both the fields are working. But a balanced approach to this would I think solve the problem long term. I don't think everybody is going to be driving a Prius, unless they solve the battery issue. Most people will drive more than 300 miles, and we're such a large country that I think the folks that get fixated on this don't realize that people drive a long distance. We don't have the infrastructure at this stage of the game for me to go out and get on a bus and take it to Columbus. I'm not in favor of riding the Greyhound bus. Okay, I'm sure there's a bus that does that, but I guess I'm more willing to get in my car and drive to Columbus. I have family that live in New Jersey. We drove over there not that long ago, and there were some charging stations at Breezewood. I don't know if you've been to Breezewood before. It's a big stopping point for people, gas, and there's all that kind of stuff there. And there was a line of cars waiting to just charge up. Now, I don't have an electric car. I don't know if you get a nice boost for a half hour or how long it takes to get you another 150, 200 miles till you get home. But this is a very large and expansive country, and we have to put in the infrastructure. If we want people to drive electric, Elon Musk is really going to have to step up his game when it comes to batteries. So I think I agree in principle that we need to do something. I just don't think we need to throw it into crisis mode at this stage of the game and start, disrupting our economy. We've been built on oil and coal in our country. That got us to where we're at, and to basically say to those oil companies and coal companies that you're going to be out of business at the end of this decade. We saw some of those dislocations over the summer. $4.50, $5 gallon gas, diesel fuel in the $5, $6 range. That hurts. That takes money out of people's pockets. So I agree in principle. We need to do something. I'm for a slow and sustainable approach to it. I want to put the word in for nuclear. One of my classmates that I went to high school with is a nuclear engineer. He was on a nuclear submarine for 15 years. He doesn't glow. He doesn't have cancer. He said that these, we have perfected, and there has not been an accident of any proportion that you can point to in the last 20 or so years that would keep us from building small nuclear power plants, clean energy, that would provide us with the, part of our energy for the longest time. So I'm for nuclear and a portfolio that's balanced, wind, solar, hydro, that will, get us to where we need to be.
Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I actually agree with most of what Bryan said. This is
Me
one
too.
of the rare topics
Well done, Bryan.
where we are in agreement. My biggest concern is I think there are too many people within our country and in the world that are still climate deniers, that feel that there has been, there's no real problem. There's no rush. We're never going to run out of fuel. And that's just wrong. We need to be concerned about the climate. I, like the others, though, have my concerns on how we go about doing that. I know that the government has put forward some very good ideas and useful plans for helping the climate just recently and putting the money into it. And this is what we need to do. I look, however, at California, and they just passed a bill. I think Governor Newsom passed a bill that said that they have to dismiss the amount of cars that run on gasoline to something like 35% within a certain number of years. And within 10 years, they'll be all electric cars. I don't see that as possible. And I know some other states are picking it up. I, like Bryan, looked around Wadsworth. I'd asked the question a few weeks ago if we have any power stations in Wadsworth. I don't think there are any. This would demand, in order to make that kind of drastic move, as good as it may be, is going to be quite difficult until we get the infrastructure, as Tom also said, and as Ron said, to complement all of this. It's just not there at this point. Also, we have to look at the cost of electric cars. That seems, cars seems to be, and gasoline seem to be one of the biggest areas that people have gone after. Electric cars are really out of the budget of most people. So we have a lot more work to do. Now, just because it's difficult, does that mean that we don't try? No, we have to continue working on this subject, or we are going to have serious problems. I agree with Bryan that nuclear is excellent, but something that Ron said, though, you have to test the safety of that. Nuclear power plants are great as long as they're safe, and they're not safe as the ones in Ukraine are right now that are in the middle of a war zone. And they have constantly been under attack, and there are concerns about disasters that could occur at these because of the Russian attack upon Ukraine. So we have to be assured that when we put a nuclear plant in, that it is not only going to be safe from normal emissions, But what if it is in the middle of a war and it gets hit by a bomb? What type of releases do we have in that particular case? So safety becomes an issue. All of these are important. Again, though, my biggest concern is the deniers who say that, oh, forget it, just use gas any way you want to. Don't worry about it. We've got to lift our heads out of the sand and recognize that we do have a problem and that we have to deal with it. And that is going to require a lot more work and effort by the American people and with other countries.
Can I just speak to the denier part? Because I believe that the denier part is a consequence of the extremists on the left that have been basically prophesying that we're going to run out of oil. Now, that wasn't that long ago where we were going to hit peak oil consumption. We were going to run out of oil. Next thing you know, they find a $8 billion field. I'm exaggerating that. It was a lot of oil that they found, in some part of the country, shale, all that kind of stuff. We've got to get the extremists on either side to pipe down. It doesn't help to have the Goracle out there telling everybody that your city is going to be swamped because ice, because the ice in Iceland is melting and it's going to wipe out New York City. It hasn't happened.
It will.
if yeah, you can say, well, it could. And the people on the other side, the deniers, and I'm not a denier, I believe that there is some part of human nature that is creating the problem that we're in. But I don't think the extremes help us. There's a guy standing on the corner, the end is near, the end is near, tomorrow, and it never happens. And people are like, I just can't believe this. So if we could work on our extremists and say, pipe down, AOC, pipe down, Al, we're going to take care of this problem in a way that's sustainable and not just, out here saying we're going to jerk everything and it's going to cost us $8 trillion to make this transition. I mean, that's not sustainable. And I think our folks on the other side of the aisle have seen that because we haven't heard much from AOC lately.
My concern, though, Brian, is that it's more than extremist. And as far as deniers, when I look at the Republican side of our political system, at least in Congress, the majority of them they may not be climate deniers, but they refuse to give a penny to combat climate change, and it becomes too political. So it's gone beyond the extremist point, I think, where that is concerned.
But, the thing is, as a country, we have made large gains in our, not in handling this issue. China, India, Russia. China is building 5 or 6 coal plants a month, it seems.
But just because they are, I'm sorry.
No, and so let's get them, the developing nations, to work on the problem and get our own house in better shape. And if someone I didn't view Ron's, layout of the problem as being Republican or Democrat. I thought that was,
No,
I agree 100% with that. Now, if Ron got on here and basically said, we're all going to die, I'd probably push back on that. We're all going to die at some point.
I guess my concern, though, Brad, when you say that, and I realize that the entire world has to get on board before anything really gets big accomplished. But that doesn't mean that just because China and India are not conforming to any type of climate change theory, doesn't mean that the United States shouldn't at least try to reduce carbon emissions in some way, shape, or form, and to do it reasonably.
There's a UN conference going on right now.
Yeah.
About this. Side note, Brian, just an interest. There's been recently been a database published of available carbon reserves, coal, gas, and oil. There's enough available to completely destroy the planet if we use it all at the moment.
There you go.
There's no shortage.
And another thing is, Governor Newsom's not going to have to worry about cars jamming his freeways anymore because everybody's leaving California in droves.
So. Oh, come on, not everybody.
They're going to You can't find a house in Idaho. I've got people in Utah and Idaho and Arizona. You can't find a house. Those people are selling out in California. They're driving the price of homes up. Cash offers 10, 15, 20% above the ask. And they're all coming from California.
To Tom's point, what do you think about our lack of leadership when it comes to this problem? How do we develop the leaders or even fashion a department of government that's responsible and non-political enough to help us make progress?
Certainly haven't seen that lately, that there's any non-political parts of government,
Wow.
including the judges.
Yeah, well, the frightening thing there is we've gotten weaker. We've gotten weaker wherever we look. Our leadership, and I'm not talking about politics here now. I'm talking about our leadership abilities in the world have decreased. We have the potential, because we are a democracy, we are so strong, we have so much wealth to take leadership on this particular issue in the world. I wish everyone could have had the same awakening I just had. I need to share this personal. 8 years ago, my son and I climbed Kilimanjaro in Africa. It has a tremendous ice cap. It's a mountain, 20,000 feet. He just was in Africa again. On his way out, he took a picture of Kilimanjaro. I compared that picture with one I have in the room that I took. There is no ice. There's a very small patch of ice left in Kilimanjaro. I can't tell you the impact that had on me on the issue we're dealing with right now. There is serious stuff going on in the world that we can't reverse if we don't get together and do it. And that gets me right back to the point I made to begin with, leadership. Our government isn't even thinking about it. Anybody in our government isn't thinking about it other than from a political viewpoint as opposed to a survival viewpoint.
Well, I think that we've covered the waterfront with a lot of very, very good comments and questions, and I appreciate it very much. And we will see you on October the 7th. So, goodbye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.